This video is supported by Skillshare. For a no commitment 2-week free trial, meaning you can binge literally any course for free, hit the link in the description and that goes towards helping the channel, so thank you. What is up creators, this is Tom, welcome back to another video. I hope you are all doing well. Happy Easter to anyone who celebrates that holiday. I've got an interesting video for you today. I want to talk about the Canon EOS R. This is a bit of an older camera. This was released in 2018. However, I've been using it full time for the past year and a half as my main professional photography camera. And it also comes with me on pretty much every video shoot as my main B camera. So it's not my main video camera, but it is my main photography camera. And I've really put the Canon EOS R through its paces. So I'd love to talk to you today about this camera in 2021, whether it's a viable choice, and really overall why I still think it's an absolutely fantastic camera, especially for the price, even amongst some of the more expensive but much newer cameras available like the Canon EOS R6 or the R5. First of all, if you don't know me, my name is Tom. I am a filmmaker and photographer based here in the UK. I create videos here on YouTube about content creation, camera stuff. So if you are interested in videos just like this one, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. But today, like I said, I want to talk about the Canon EOS R. And as someone who has used this camera for a long time now, I want to sort of share some of my thoughts and feelings on this camera, what I've really loved using about the camera. So we'll start off with the things that I've absolutely loved about it. Then we'll move on to some things that I really don't enjoy about the camera because it's certainly not perfect. And then we'll sort of wrap it up at the end of the video. Before we kick off, a super quick one. So I have only ever used with the Canon EOS R EF lenses adapted using the Canon RF to EF adapter. So all of my experiences with using this adapter, I do not use RF glass on this camera. What I would say is that the performance is pretty much native, like pretty much that's like standard. The adapter is fantastic. It was built by Canon for Canon systems. All of my EF lenses work fantastically on the R. So kicking off with some things I absolutely love about the camera. First of all is its sensor. Like the stills that you get out of this camera are fantastically high quality. It's my favorite stills camera that I've ever owned, albeit that I've never owned anything like the Sony R line of cameras, and I've never owned anything like the Canon EOS R5, which are stills improvements over this camera. But for the vast majority of professional photography work, the Canon EOS R is going to be a really viable option in terms of the quality of stills that you get out of the camera. I've shot for some pretty high profile clients on this camera and nobody's ever complained about sort of, you know, the quality of photos that you're able to get out of it. I think it's a 30.2 megapixel sensor on this camera. And like I said, it's just fantastic. The RAWs that you're getting out of it, super detailed. I don't want to focus on this too much because, you know, the takeaway here is it's a really great stills camera. One of the main things that I've loved and enjoyed about using the Canon EOS R is the battery life. The battery life is absolutely amazing. The camera uses these batteries. These are Canon LPE6 batteries, and they literally last for like 4 hours a pop on this one. Maybe if you're shooting video constantly, it might be closer to, you know, like 2 hours of actual recording time. But just like a really good battery life. I will take 3 or 4 batteries on a shoot day and like literally have to never worry about actual battery life or the camera dying on me, especially when you're doing work like gimbal work and, you know, having to keep your camera mounted, and it's a bit of a faff to take your camera on and off. Like I literally have no problems ever with battery life on the Canon EOS R. This is always like a gold standard of battery life I always compare my other cameras to. For instance, like the Fuji X-T4, which is like was supposed to be an upgrade on battery life from the X-T3, like was probably a quarter as good in terms of battery life on the Canon EOS R. The camera comes with consistently good video, and now we will definitely talk about the video capabilities of the camera a little bit later on, but the video is good that you get out of this camera. And again, we will talk about codecs slightly more in detail in the things I dislike, because it does need to be talked about more in terms of the specs and capabilities of the Canon EOS R, especially in 2021. But on the whole, the video that you can get out of the camera is good. I use this camera as my main B camera for video shoots, meaning that if I'm running an interview or more formal video setup like this, I'll have my main camera. This is the Canon C200 shooting me like this. I will have a second angle recording on the Canon EOS R and I will shoot generally in 1080p. And for me, a lot of the time, this centers around, is the lens that I'm using on the camera good? Because if the lens is good, then generally you'll get really crisp, nice looking 1080p video out of the Canon EOS R. If you're using slightly sort of rubbishy glass and rubbishy lenses, the quality out of the camera will be a bit mushy because it is only recording in 1080p. But overall, it is a decent video performer and a fantastic B camera for me as a, as someone who works in photo and video professionally. One of the reasons that it makes such a good B camera is Canon's autofocus is absolutely amazing. This camera uses dual pixel autofocus like it is standard on a lot of their cameras now, and the autofocus is just absolutely brilliant. Like, and I can record an interview, literally just set it and forget it, not have to even worry. Things like tracking are just brilliant. Like you don't have to worry about any focusing issues on the Canon EOS R. It never hunts. Like overall, just a fantastic experience with the autofocus. Again, this sort of just comes back to just like ease of use, and this camera is a fantastic tool for a video or photo professional, or definitely anyone who is looking to get into more serious video and photo, because that autofocus is great. Bad autofocus is just extremely frustrating. You don't have to worry about it with this camera. And then finally, we have Canon's colors, and this is just, a bit of a Canon standard, but I love shooting Canon. I've been shooting Canon for over a year and a half now after switching from Sony, and the colors are just like beautiful. You don't have to worry about slightly weird looking skin tones. Like it will be using similar color profiles that I'm using on my Canon C200, the Canon Cinema line here. And yeah, overall, like beautiful stills, beautiful images. There's a reason that everyone harps on about Canon's colors, and that is because they are really, really great. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about some things I dislike consistently about using the Canon EOS R. A bit of a curveball, first of all, is that everyone rages about this touch bar on the back of the Canon EOS R, and I genuinely don't understand what the issue is with this thing, because all right, it's not like the biggest a useful feature. Like I actually have unprogrammed any buttons, but like that doesn't matter. Like, all right, it takes up a tiny bit of real estate, but like it's hardly a deal breaker. It just means that I don't press anything with these buttons here. It's always seemed like a really weird one as to why people are so upset about that thing. It also has a swivelly screen, which is super useful for me and filming YouTube videos with a full frame camera. I've totally gone on a tangent here and talking about things that I still like about the camera, but let's talk about some things that I dislike. First of all is the video codecs and frame rates. Like this camera got a lot of heat when it was announced because its specs, like from a video perspective, are really far behind even what people were doing at 2018 of its time's release. And like in 2021, it's extremely behind the times. The biggest omission is the 4K crop and also the lack of 4K 60 frames a second. Like these are pretty video standard things. Like you have a beautiful full frame sensor here on the Canon EOS R, and you're getting a pretty aggressive 4K crop. And the fact that you are having to deal with that in a camera like this is a pretty big issue. Personally, it doesn't actually bother me all that much because the 4K is still fantastic and like extremely high quality coming out of that. And if you just know about the crop and like after using the camera for a few months, you get used to the fact that if you need a wilder field of view, you'll film in 1080p, and then if you if cropping isn't an issue, you'll just shoot in that 4K field of view and then just have the crop. Like it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it is just would have been nice to get nice looking 4K full frame video right after the bat. And then the other thing is those video codecs and the frame rates not allowing for higher frame rate options in like 4K. So 4K 60 is a bit of a standard now in 2021. We would like to see all cameras coming out, or at least all cameras of a certain standard coming out with 4K 60. This camera is still only 1080p in 60 frames a second, and then it shifts down to 720p in 120 frames a second. Like that's really pretty unacceptable for a camera of this level. I personally don't shoot slow motion all that much, so that one doesn't bother me. But if you are someone who would be wanting that sort of level of frame rate, maybe need to look at Sony's lines because they do definitely have much better high frame rate recording options. And then the next one, the last sort of biggest thing for me, and there are of course, you know, small nitpicky things, but overall my experiences with the Canon EOS R just like fantastic. But these are the biggest significant things that I was sort of not a fan of. And then is the single SD card slot. So this camera has a single SD card slot. It does not use a dual SD card slot system. That means that if I was shooting something super high profile, I would probably be apprehensive about using this camera. For instance, I don't know if you'd be wanting to do wedding photography, because if one of your cards died on a wedding shoot, that would be just an absolutely massive issue. So, you know, not amazing, but it is a limitation of the camera, just something to know about. And, you know, I've never had any issues with SD cards breaking, but it's definitely one to note. Okay, guys, so let's wrap up my thoughts and feelings on the camera. Like, the biggest thing I think that the camera has going for it in 2021 is its price. The camera actually has held its price and value relatively well, considering the fact that it's, you know, almost like, it's like 2.5 years old now. And it is still a viable choice in 2021 for either people looking to get started in professional video or are a professional photographer. Like, the stills that you get out of this camera is a much better stills camera than it is a video camera for sure. And I do think for the price that you can pick up this camera used now about £1,200, you know, $1,300, $1,400 I think in the States. And considering that is like $1,000 cheaper than the Canon EOS R6, unless you absolutely need that higher frame rate option recordings, the 4K 60 or the 4K completely full frame, like these things don't bother me, especially on a B cam. Like, I just want really good, high quality 1080p video for things like interview recording. And this camera does that. Like, I don't need to worry too much about it. Even with the 4K crop, it doesn't bother me a massive amount. So this is why I still consistently use the camera, because it is fantastic. It still accompanies me on every single shoot I go on. And I do think it is a massively underrated camera, even in 2021. And there we have it, guys. That's sort of it. My thoughts and feelings on the I almost said the R6, like this is not the R6, the Canon EOS R. I'd love to know whether you guys actually are using the EOS R or previously have used the Canon EOS R6. Why do I keep calling it the R6? The Canon EOS R. It is a great camera and I've absolutely loved using it, and I'd really like to hear your thoughts. I'll be down in the comments as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.